this, and this is going to be a little rant of mine. As you can probably tell by the title, you probably know what it's about, but let me give a little bit of backstory on this. I usually tape SmackDown, usually watch it later. Watched it yesterday night, or last night, I guess, last night, and going along, okay show, and then the very thing that I often gripe about most when it comes to WWE happened yet again. Triple H came out, had a little match with Shelton Benjamin. It's a pretty good match. And then in the last minute, everything that was good about the match basically got thrown out the window, and Triple H showed why he is incapable of putting anybody over at the moment. That he truly does not feel is on his level, in my opinion. It has often been said, and I will second this, and anyone that has heard any of my videos before knows that, you know, I'm not the biggest Triple H fan. That doesn't mean I don't think he's a good wrestler, because I do think he's a good wrestler. I think he's good at what he does. He's not going to go out there and do, 10,000 variants of the same move. He's not going to, do a lot of different things. But what he does very well, and he also knows how to, command a match, and that he can take a guy and work with him and really work a very good match in that way, as far as pacing and what to do at the right moments and playing to the crowd. All that, he's excellent at that. No question about that. And by no means do I think that, he doesn't deserve his spot. I've said that before. I think that he is deserving. I think he's definitely one of the top guys on the roster. And all of that, I don't think he's where he is at just because of who he's married to, because he was where he was at before he was married to who he's married to. So I just want to lay that out first. I don't think anything like that about Triple H. My biggest complaint with Triple H is this, that he does not put anybody over in any sort of way unless they are top echelon guys. Unless somebody else has already made them, then he'll go out of his way and he'll make them look good. Putting somebody over is basically just letting them look good. Even if that means in a 6-minute match, letting a guy for a minute and a half go out and look like $1 million. Just for that minute and a half. It makes them look good. It makes it look like that guy deserves to be in the ring with you, at least for that little fleeting moment. And too often, it always looks like Triple H is in there with guys when he's not in there with top echelon guys that have no business being in the ring with him. Now, a lot of people will come out and say, he's just doing what he's told, as far as such as when, he basically buried an entire division in the tag division on Raw, or you look at the match on SmackDown with Shelton Benjamin, where you had all of this going on and you were thinking to yourself, okay, the only way Shelton's going to win, if you're a smart fan, is there's going to have to be some sort of interference. There was interference and Shelton still lost. So, which basically, the last minute of that match basically killed everything that was good about that match. Now, that's not good. And, I'm sure in Triple H's mind, he felt like he went out there and did what he was supposed to do, and I'm sure he'll say, hey, I didn't come up with the ending of that match. The thing is, he has enough power in that company. He has been around long enough, just as a respect, same thing with Undertaker, that if he's asked to go out to do something that he knows, hey, this isn't going to make this guy look good, and it's going to be better for the business if this guy looks good, then maybe we should do something different. And for anybody that says, well, he doesn't really do that, this, that, or the other, realize this. The only reason why he is in a feud with Khali right now is because when he was brought the idea of feuding with Umaga, he said, I don't want to feud with Umaga. This was before Umaga got hurt. I want to feud with Khali because I think that no one wants to see me and Umaga. And there might be some truth to that, but I think that you can sell him and Umaga better than, him and Khali. That's just me. I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks that, but there we go. That said, he goes out and does stuff like this. And this is the stuff that pisses me off about Triple H. Here's a guy who, by all accounts, bows, prays, does sacrificial lambs to the altar of Ric Flair. And yet, The thing that made Ric fucking Flair, was the fact that he could go out on any night and make a broom. The old joke was he could go out with a broom and make that broom look like it not only belonged in the ring with him, but it could beat him, and you believed it. That doesn't happen with Triple H. Now, Triple H can go, hey, I'm not told to do that, but at some point, he should be able to go, you know what? My place in this business is secure because of who I'm married to. Unless he doesn't think he's going to be married to Stephanie forever, which I doubt. You know, I have my legacy pretty much set. I am respected as far as the brass goes, as far as the business end of this goes. So there is no harm in me going out and putting over a guy and making a guy look good to help create a star. Because if there's one thing WWE has needed, probably in going back 4 years, has been big new stars, which they haven't had. And every time that one seems to be on the precipice, you know, he feud with Triple H and then they make to look like an idiot. And that happens far too often. You know, go back and look last year when you had all of the injuries happen. You know, you didn't have, because the mid-card guys, all of the mid-card guys were made to look like such jokes by so many of the upper-card guys that you didn't believe that any of those guys could be raised up. And for that, and so you had this big void in the company. And that's not good, because that's going to happen. Pro wrestling is physical. Injuries are going to happen. Guys are going to be on the shelf. Things are going to happen, and you're going to have to go out there and you have to rely on, you know, your mid-card guys to be able to come up. And if you make them look bad every time out, when they take on one of the upper-card guys, no one's going to buy, for example, that, you know, in Shelton Benjamin. You look at the SmackDown Scramble. If it was a one-on-one match with any of those guys, and that includes MVP, who I think out of those guys probably, if he was in the ring, would look the most viable out of any of those guys, you would say no one would think that any of them had a chance. Not a one to take on Triple H. Now maybe someone will come out of there as the winner because, you know, of the way the match is set up, but I don't think if you put these guys one-on-one, any of those guys would be viable as a champion. You know, I would even ask, why is Triple H even the fucking champion right now? He doesn't need to be champion. He's feuding with freaking Khali. You know, Undertaker might be a much better choice right now for be champion. I.e., he didn't have to take the belt off of Edge, though I will agree, storyline-wise, it was a good idea. You know, would it have been so hard for Triple H to say, hey, I'm leaving Raw, let me put over the guy who, you know, they want to kind of be the champion, even if they make it look like a fluke victory in CM Punk? Would that have been so hard? I don't think so. But instead they choose Edge so that Triple H can keep the title on SmackDown, and it's like the title is like secondary now next to, you know, the stuff going on with Undertaker. It'd be much better if Undertaker had the title and everything was revolving around the world title. Just my opinion. I'm an Undertaker mark, so leave it be at that. But again, you know, this is the type of stuff that Triple H does that irks me. Now, you know, I could also talk about the stuff, you know, most of you know Mark Madden did a article talking about, you know, Bryan Danielson in particular and comparing him to Triple H, blah, 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 blah. You know, we could go there and to Mark Madden and to Triple H himself, who then came out with an article and said, you know, talking about that he didn't feel like guys had the passion because they were playing their video games and listening to iPods, that, you know, to be the #1 guy in the world, you have to be able to sell out, which I agree, which means he's not the #1 guy in the world. It's either Cena or Mystico. It's definitely not him. I wouldn't even say he's probably the #3 draw in WWE right now, let alone when you start talking about in the world. But, you know, it amazes me when he says stuff like that, because the only reason he got the spot he was in was because of who he knew, not because of his talent, because of who he knew and the fact that he was getting drunk with the right guys at the time. That is why he has the spot he has now. It's not Stephanie, not anything like that. That is why. Every guy in the back knows that. And if that's not the truth, that's what they think. And Triple H should, instead of thinking to himself, you know what? This is how it is. He should go to these guys and should prove that, you know, I didn't get where I am because of who I knew. I got because of who I am because of this, this, and this. When he says crap like that, no one believes him because most people think the complete opposite, that he got where he was because of backstage politics, because he watched Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and Shawn Michaels pull backstage crap, which he's pulled himself, and done that. We saw the, you know, we saw the, you know, the long ass run that he had as champion, and the fact that, you know, there were guys that were ready to be on his level, and he wouldn't let them be on their level. And at some point in that time, two of those guys have left already. One of them left and eventually came back for a huge salary. So being HBK, Rob Van Dam, and Booker T. People hate it when I bring that up. I know that, but it's the truth. You know, those were three guys that, you know, Booker T was eventually given his opportunity. Rob Van Dam was given his opportunity, blew it. I'll admit that. Okay, but no one can still explain to me why he refuses to put over HBK, to put over Chris Jericho. Why he refuses to do anything with Chris Jericho. Why he wouldn't go to the when Stephanie brought, because it was Stephanie's idea apparently, to bring Chris Jericho back. Why he wouldn't go to his wife and say, you know what? Why don't me and Chris work something? Why don't me and him do something? Why? Because he didn't think Chris Jericho deserved the spot that he was given. Okay? It's crap like that that pisses me off about Triple H. And then what gets me even more is you have these fans that are supposed to be smart fans. And I hate saying that because we're all marks. But they're supposed to be smart fans. And they cheer Triple H and say Triple H is the greatest this and greatest that and greatest this. And then completely ignore the fact that a lot of the things that people don't like about the WWE right now, a lot of it can be laid at the foot of Triple H. Sorry, but it's the truth. Not only that, but there's this double standard when it comes to Triple H, and this is what irritates me even more. Go back and look at the Royal Rumble. You know, the Royal Rumble where Cena came back and was Superman? Before Cena did his Superman gimmick, go back and look what Triple H was doing, because guess what? He was being Superman too, and nobody cared. Nobody gave a damn. Why? Because it was Triple H. And we have this, people have this weird notion that, ooh, Triple H. We have to respect Triple H. Cena comes out, you boo him. Now I understand there's different reasons for that. And that's fine. And people don't have to like Cena. I'm not saying that. But, you know, realize that they basically did the exact same thing, okay? That Triple H basically played up the fact that he knew that, you know, people and the WWE, that Cena was going to be booed, and it was going to be Triple H versus Cena. And, you know, that whole bit of it. This is one of the, you know, like I keep saying, when Triple H pulls stuff like he pulled on SmackDown, where he easily it didn't have to end that way. It could have ended very separate. When he buries an entire division for no reason whatsoever, and even if the writer said, hey, why don't you go out and we do this, he should have said, no, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that. That is not needed. He's smart enough in this business to know that, but he doesn't care about it. You know, he learned all this stuff from Ric Flair, but he didn't learn the single most important thing, and that was to be able to go out there and make a guy. You know, we could go through a laundry list of guys who they feuded with Undertaker. Maybe they didn't come out the winners with the feud with Undertaker, but after that, at the end of that feud, those guys looked much better than they did than going in. How many people can you say that about Triple H? How many guys feud with Triple H, and even if they win, even if they come out on the winning side of the feud, they come out looking weaker than when they went in? That's the difference. That's the thing that irks me about Triple H. Because Triple H could go out there, could make a lot of guys, could make, you know, Raw, SmackDown, anybody in the WWE. He could make so many guys in the WWE where you wouldn't have this lack of star power you have now, which is the problem. And we wouldn't have this. But instead, he wants to live in his little ego-minded world where he believes that if he had been given that spot that he was supposed to have instead of Steve Austin, he would have been the guy to carry the WWE to that big banner. And while, don't get me wrong, to be in this business, to be in pro wrestling, and to be successful at pro wrestling, you have to have an ego. If you don't have an ego, you shouldn't be in the business. But at some point, you have to have, your ego needs to sometimes stay in check, and you need to remember reality. And the reality is, to this day, Triple H is not nearly as over as Austin, ever. He has never been near as much as Austin has ever been. He has never been, you know, when Austin was in WCW maybe, but from the time that he won the Royal Rumble to now, Triple H has never been nearly as over as him. Never been nearly as over as The Rock. Never been nearly as over as The Undertaker. I could go on and on. There's a litany of guys that I would argue were over more than Triple H since Triple H has been in the WWE and since he's won championships in the WWE. Again, you know, people come on here and say, oh, but he made Batista. Did he really make Batista? I mean, come on. He made Randy Orton. Undertaker made Randy Orton. Triple H just brought him further along on the ride. I'm sorry. You know, other than that, who else can you name? Who else can you say, you know, he made look like a main eventer? I wouldn't say that with Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy just looked like Jeff Hardy, and he got a win over Triple H. That's what it looked like. You didn't see anything succeed after that. You didn't see anything happen after that. To where you believe that Jeff Hardy was going to be, you know, the man. You know, Triple H has never done that. And until he does that, the WWE is still going to be in the place that it is. Undertaker's willing to do it. Austin was willing to do it to the right guys. He wasn't willing to do it with Lesnar, and everybody agrees that he made the right choice because it wasn't the right choice at the time for Austin to job to Lesnar. But, you know, he's tried to make guys. You have Mick Foley. Triple H was made by Mick Foley for the most part. If it wasn't for Mick Foley, Triple H would not be considered anywhere near as great as he is now. You know, and I could go on and on. You know, Terry Funk. Terry Funk made an entire freaking promotion in ECW. You know, Ric Flair. Ric Flair pretty much carried, you know, Crockett Promotions, and early on when he came back to WCW, by making guys, by turning around and saying, okay, let me make this guy, let me try to make this guy into a star. Let me, you know, look at Lex Luger. Lex Luger looked the best against Ric Flair. You know, he made Lex Luger look better than anyone else has ever had. And that's just the way it is. And this is what irks me about Triple H, because I wish to God Triple H would get through his head. And I also wish that, you know, because if you've read the Sun article, I think it was the Sun, that I think it was Slam Magazine who did the article where he talked about Bryan Danielson and guys not having the desire and all of this stuff. I understand guys want to get WWE articles, but at some point you have to be a journalist. And when he brought up the fact of, you know, Bryan Danielson, but he didn't call out Bryan Danielson, but he said you can't be the best in the world and only be wrestling against 500, wrestling, you know, in front of 500 people. The guy should have turned around and said, well, you know, given the same time in your career that Bryan Danielson is in his career, wouldn't you say that he is actually maybe more successful than you were at that point in time? You know, Bryan Danielson is a wanted commodity. I don't think at the point where Triple H was, where you would call him a wanted commodity. He may have been a commodity, but I don't think he was a wanted commodity. There's, you know, you could definitely make an argument that Bryan Danielson is a wanted commodity, and you're telling me that he wouldn't ask Shawn Michaels, hey, how good do you think the kid really is? And also, this is another thing I don't get about the whole Bryan Danielson thing. Do people not get that it's a gimmick? That it's a gimmick. As far as I know, and from everyone I've ever talked to that knows, they've said Bryan Danielson does believe he's the best wrestler in the world. It's a gimmick. It is a gimmick. You know, yet the guy is wanted in Mexico. The guy's wanted in Japan. The guy, you know, is wanted. He's one of the big guys when it comes to indie wrestling. And people go, it's indie wrestling. Who cares? That's still not too shabby. When you realize there's not too many guys that people are actually willing to pay to go see, even guys who are on major, you know, promotions. You know, there's not a lot of those guys that people are willing to, you know, to pay to see that really influx an event the way that, you know, I think Bryan Danielson is. But that's just my case. Not saying he's the best wrestler in the world. Not saying that at all, because I do think drawability plays a role in that. But I'm just saying that if he's going to say something like that, you know, who's ever doing the interview should question him on it. If he's going to say that about, you know, guys having iPods and you know, and this and that and the other, you know, he should say, well, you know, what were you doing at that point in time, because we all know that's not what he was doing. We know he wasn't, practicing his craft. Well, he was, we know that's not the. It's, it irks me to no degree that people, and it's not just him when I'm talking about the journalists. The same thing with Gary and Gabe from Ring of Honor. No one ever questions them on why they haven't invested more money in production values, and the same thing goes on and on. And I know it's because people want the interviews and they don't want to upset anybody. But at some point, you need to ask not a blindsided question. Don't get me wrong, because I don't think that's good. But just ask them a tough question. Ask them a question that, hey, they have to think about. If they answer a question and it's like, well, that's crap, call them on it. Say, hey, well, what about this? If he's going to say that, well, you got to be able to draw to be the best wrestler in the world, then you need to look at him and say, well, then that means you've probably never been the best wrestler in the WWE ever. You've been like the third. At one point, you may have been the best. At one small stretch, you may have been the #1 draw. But really, you were probably the #2. Really. So, you've never, I think you could make the argument he's never been the #1 draw in WWE. So, give me a fucking break. Triple H makes me very mad. I've been pretty, I'm not trying to go too crazy because I will go crazy on Triple H, but when I talk about Triple H, but it's that sort of thing that irks me about Triple H. If you haven't seen the match, go watch the match. You will see what I mean. It's a nice little match up until the end. And then the last minute killed the match and killed anything that, they were trying to do for Shelton. Just the way it is. I've ranted for long enough. I'm out. Bye.